مساء الخير أعزائي المشاهدين، وأهلا بكم في حلقة جديدة من حلقات مصدر ثقة. وكالعادة النهاردة معايا مصدر ثقة. هنتكلم عن البروبوزيشنز والبالت وازاي نملاها وازاي نتأكد ان احنا فاهمين الكلام اللي احنا بنعمل عليه فوت، علشان مهم جدا جدا، لان احنا بنحدده النهاردة في الورقة دي هو اللي هيمشي في حياتنا بعد كده. وطبعا زي ما قلنا ان الالكشن السنة دي مهم جدا جدا، فطبعا كلنا معظمنا جالنا الجواب ده خلاص، المفروض ان هو جه لكل واحد فينا. وكتير قوي بعتولي وسالوني عايزين ازاي نملاها وايه الموجود جوه، واحنا اول مره مثلا ننتخب او انتخبنا قبل كده واحنا مش فاهمين وكنا بنختار اي حاجه. فانا مبسوطه جدا جدا بضيفي النهارده، وهو يعني طبعا يعني حاجه كبيره في السياسه في كاليفورنيا، وهو فعلا فاهم كويس قوي اللي احنا هنتكلم فيه النهارده، يعني فعلا مصدر ثقه. معايا النهارده لانس كريستيانسن, the Vice President of California Policy Center. Welcome, Lance, and thank you for coming to my show.
So glad to be here with you, Dahlia.
Thank you so much. So today we are diving into one of the most important topics for voters in California, the propositions on the 2024 ballot. These propositions can often be complex and confusing, but they have a big impact on our communities and everyday lives. So to help us understand this measure better, we have a special guest, of course, today, Lance, with us today, an expert on California politics. Lance will break down each proposition, explain what they mean in simple terms, and tell us how they could affect you and your family, whether you are seasoned voter or casting your ballot for the first time. We are here to make sure you have the information you need to make an informed decision. So let's get started. I will start with you, Lance, introducing yourself to my audience.
Sure. My name is Lance Christensen. I'm the father of 5 kids. I've been married to my wife, Kelsey, for 24 years. We live up in Northern California, just past Sacramento. And I worked for the California State Legislature for 17 years. And for a short period of time, I worked for Governor Schwarzenegger in his Department of Finance. And so I've been doing California policy and politics for a long time and trying to help people better understand how the legislative process works. It's very confusing, and some people don't understand why they have to vote on so many things. And so I'll try to break that down for you today. But my job, I'm the vice president at the California Policy Center. We're an educational nonprofit, meaning that I travel the state and I help communicate with people on different issues as it relates to their government, whether it be the state government or their local government. So school boards, city councils, county government, and try to help them be better citizens and give some oversight and transparency to the process.
Yeah. I'm so glad you're here today, and you're really a trust source for us today, especially in this. So you are the most expert on that thing today. So I want to start with a question came to me as they are asking, what is the Electoral College and how is the point count and how does that work? So we will get the picture of the Electoral College on the screen now, and I want to explain it by simple way. What does that mean?
So back when the founders of the country were establishing the Constitution, they were trying to find a way to allow for the states to have an equal say in what the government did. What they didn't want is what we call a popular vote, meaning that they would just simply elect a president based upon how many votes they got throughout the whole set of colonies or early states at the time. And remember, back then, it took sometimes weeks or months to get information from one place to the other. So what they would do is they would have the people in a state vote for their presidential and vice president candidate at the time. And the person who got the most votes, that state would send their delegates to D.C. to make that decision. And that was determined by how many congressional representatives they have. Over the years, this changed a little bit, but not much. The Electoral College is basically this. every state has as many electors as they have congressmen. So in California, we have 53 congressmen. That means that you've got 53 electoral, or 52 now, actually. We used to have 53 electoral votes. And the whole goal is for the presidential candidates to go from state to state. So they'll go to Iowa, they'll go to Florida, they'll go to different key places to pick up as many electoral votes as possible. And so as they campaign throughout this year, you'll see they're spending a lot of times in places like Michigan or Pennsylvania or Arizona. These are what are considered swing states, meaning they could vote for a Democrat or they could vote for a Republican. Who is going to give them the best option? And so there's a lot of liberal states like California, which is likely not going to vote for a Republican. It used to, but not right now. Or you got places like maybe Utah that's going to vote for a Republican, but not a lot of votes there. So the candidates will go to the places where they think they can actually get the most votes and get those electoral votes. So out of the 435 delegates, they have to get a majority of those. So about 270 votes to win.
And every state is different.
Every state's going to be different, and every state has a different process of doing that. There are some states that will allow the votes to be counted by congressional district. So if you win a congressional district, you get that electoral vote, but the other candidate might get the other vote. There's a couple of those states that still do that. Some states will just say it's a winner take all, and some states will say we will follow what other states do and we'll assign our votes based upon how the popular vote goes. But really when it comes down to it, every state has its own electors. It's based upon the size of Congress, and you have to get to a majority of 535 votes, to win.
And to win, you have to have 270?
270 votes, yeah.
270 votes. Okay, and California is 52 of them?
Well, and let me step back. Plus, we have a couple senators, so I think it's 54 electoral votes for California.
In California this year. Yes, okay. So now, before we go to the propositions, I want to start with this ballot. Every one of us now should have been received this envelope, right? Has my information on. So inside this envelope, we'll go step by step. What should we do with this?
So that is the envelope that you're going to send your ballot back to the either drop it off to the registrar of voters or a drop box or put it in the mail.
Okay.
But that's the envelope to do it. And you'll notice there's a hole in the side.
Yes.
So they can tell if you have a ballot inside of it.
Oh.
But that hole doesn't show anything. It doesn't show you voted. It just shows that there's paper in there.
There is paper in there. Yeah. And what is the most important part in this envelope?
So you'll need to just sign the envelope.
Here.
Sign the envelope there. That's all you have to do. And if you put it in the mail, you don't have to put a stamp on it. They'll deliver it.
Okay.
Or there are drop-off boxes. And if you go to your voter guide here on page, I think it's page 3. Excuse me here.
I think we all received that one too.
Yeah, you should all have it.
Yeah.
It's, excuse me, here it is. It's on page 12 and 13. And it will actually give you a website where you can type in your address and you can find the exact place to drop it off.
I think every city has special places.
Every city, every community has a different drop-off area.
So for here, we need to sign this one.
Yeah.
Okay. When we go here in the ballot, I don't want to have my information, but that's fine. So in this ballot, so first page, it has I voted sticker.
I love the sticker if you want.
Yeah, I love it. So this is for me, right? Page 1.
Yep.
It doesn't even say page 1. We'll start with here. It said here, page 1.
Yeah. So in the ballots, at least in this county, the local issues will be first. So Los Angeles, they'll be first. But if you're in a different county, they might do it differently. They might have the president first and Congress and the legislature.
Yeah.
But it looks like here they do it with the locals, and that's fine. So we'll have like your state assembly member, it'll have your state senator, and probably if you're electing a mayor or school board, those will be on there.
Okay, so for I will speak about Los Angeles County because this is the one I received.
Correct.
So page 1 and page 2, it's my city, my county.
Yes.
And we'll start, I think, with page 3 in Los Angeles County. And here we will sees
The propositions, right?
Okay.
So on your ballot, it actually says two things. One, it will say either proposition or state measure. That's the same
state
thing.
measure or proposition.
Proposition is it's your decision to make. The state measure is just the way they label it for the ballot.
Yes, true. So, can you give us a brief overview of what propositions are and why they are important in the California election process?
So California has been a state since 1850. We're going to our 175th year as a state. When we became a state, we had the ability to vote, and that franchise or that ability became the same for all back when the 19th Amendment was passed, so women could vote too. At the same time that was happening, we put on the ballot the idea that we could do ballot propositions. It's called direct democracy. California is actually a republic form of government, which means that we elect people to go to Sacramento to represent us. They make decisions about any number of issues, your roads, schools, libraries, parks, public safety. But there's sometimes when they don't make good decisions. And so in 1911, they gave us the ballot proposition, which allows us to directly vote on certain issues. Some ballots, there's a lot of issues, and some there's just a couple. But back in 2014, the governor at the time, Jerry Brown, he didn't want to put ballot propositions on the primary ballot earlier in the year because that's when a lot of conservatives showed up to vote. So he moved to all of them except for the ones that the legislature does to the November ballot.
Yeah.
That's why you see on here 10 measures right now. And each one of those is a yes or a no vote.
Yes.
We're not amending it. You can't go through and change the verbiage the way you want it or change the words. You either say, yes, I support this.
So this is the final.
This is it.
Yeah.
And then once we vote on it, it becomes law in January. And what happens is the legislature can't change that law.
They cannot.
No, they have to go back to the people to change it if they do want to change it.
Second election, next election.
Another election if they want to do that. But a lot of times they say, okay, the people have spoken. We now have to obey this. So they do their legislative work around these issues that we vote on. And that actually informs the way I vote sometimes. Because I really believe there are certain issues I may agree with the ballot proposition, but I may not agree that this is the right way to do it.
Right.
And I would prefer that the legislature make that decision because then they can be flexible. But if we lock them in, then they can't be flexible, and sometimes it comes at great cost to us.
Yes, that's true. That's true. Okay, so let's start with propositions 2. What is the main issues that this proposition address, and what would a yes or no vote mean for voters?
So this is what they call the Public Education Facilities Bond Measure. And so to make it really simple, this would allow for school districts across the state, with the help of the state government, to put $10 billion, billion, a lot of money out there that school districts could apply for and raise their own bond measure. So it means borrowing. It's like taking out a mortgage for schools, right?
It's a loan.
So these schools will take out the money, then the state will come in and match a certain percentage of that money. So if they need to build a new school or remodel an old school or do something different, they can do that.
Yeah.
So the supporters think it's important because we have a lot of old schools.
Yeah.
There's some areas in the state where they haven't built schools for a while. In my community, we actually share a high school with 2 different cities. And it's kind of hard because the one city's grown really fast, but they have to come to our high school. Okay. And they would like to build their own, but they haven't had the money to do it so far. But a bond, when you take out a bond or a loan, what happens is it takes time to pay that off. And so for the rule of thumb that I have is that for every dollar that the state borrows in this kind of bond, it's called a general obligation bond, meaning you're not paying revenue into it. This just comes out of the general fund. So when you pay your taxes,
from
general fund comes from that money, right? Mostly your income tax. That money, the legislature will set aside for the projects that it's allocated. And for every dollar you borrow, it takes another dollar to pay it back in interest. So for every dollar you borrow, it's 2 you pay back. And that's over usually 30-year period. So if somebody does this, they may pass that cost on not only to their kids, but to their grandkids.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's something to think about.
10 billion.
$10 billion.
Okay. And who will pay that back?
The taxpayers do.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So this is proposition 2. So we'll not say yes or no, we're just explaining it to... Is that
Just
what you
explain it. So people have to decide, are they willing to increase their taxes to pay for
We already had a very high tax. Yeah.
highest tax rate in the nation on a lot of places,
Yeah.
of a lot of things. And do they really think that the school districts are really managing their finances well enough to do this? They wouldn't have to borrow the money if they were managing their finances. Does that make sense?
And my question was in this proposition, like, if you're not happy with a district, are you really giving them the money they need?
Yeah.
And we see it these days.
Yes.
Like you know what happened in Chino Valley Unified School District? They hold the money, like they hold the fund from the district. So with this control,
So this also gives a lot of control to Sacramento.
Correct.
Right. Now, it will require the local district to raise its own money, its own bonds to match what the state's going to give. But that once you hand over your control to the state, they then can dictate how you build things and what you do.
Yeah, right. Good to know. Thank you for that one too. So now let's go to proposition 3. Can you explain it?
I can. So in 2008, many of your viewers may remember, we voted on Proposition 8, which was the Protect Marriage Amendment. And it was 14 words. It basically said marriage is between a man and a woman. That was it. It didn't prohibit any other arrangements. It just said this is what marriage is. Well, the Supreme Court eventually overturned that law, as it did across the country. And so now there are people that are gay that get married, and pulling the religious or the social aspect out, it's the law across the country, whether we agree with it or not.
Of course.
But that was a law that was determined by the Supreme Court, not by the people.
Yeah, in the Constitution.
But when we passed the Proposition 8 in the state constitution in California, it was overwhelming. It was like 58 to 42. It was a pretty significant amount of people that supported traditional marriage. Well, now the Supreme Court has spoken, and so what happens is a lot of advocates, especially for gay marriage and other kinds of marriage, are saying, well, hold on, we need to get this out of the Constitution. I could understand that argument. That makes sense to me. But what I can't understand is it's not just repealing those 14 words. If they were simply just crossing those 14 words out and pulling it out of the Constitution, I would be less opposed to that kind of procedure. But what this does is this adds in the ability for anybody of any kind of tradition to marry. And what it also doesn't do is it doesn't protect churches, ministers, priests, pastors, in their religious liberty. And say they don't want to marry a gay couple or a throuple or, a different kind of marriage.
I agree.
Would they be forced to do so under this? I believe they would be.
Of course.
And so I think it doesn't set a good precedent. I think it challenges our religious liberty. And for people of faith, Proposition 3 is actually going to take them backwards instead of going forwards.
Yes, thank you. And I know you are Christian, and this is against our...
And this isn't something that's, again, gay marriage is already legal.
It's already in.
It's already legal, whether we agree with it or not. But this doesn't just fix that language.
Yes.
This goes an extra step, and I think that's the part most people don't understand, is that it could really inhibit our belief systems and our churches.
The church, That's a great point. Because most of the one I discussed it with them, they said it's already in. So there is no difference if you said yes or no to this proposition, because it's already in.
Yeah.
But the point you just mentioned is that churches will be forced to do it.
Yeah, they could be.
Yeah, they could be, but if there is a law, they will.
Yeah.
Sooner or later, they will.
Yeah.
So, this is a good one, too. So, let's go to the next one, which is Proposition 4.
Yeah, this is another bond measure. So like the one in Proposition 2, this would provide billions of dollars to put forward towards environmental issues.
Do we need more debt?
No, we don't. California is already upside down at debt. And trillions, we owe trillions of dollars of liabilities.
Yes.
Trillions, not billions, trillions.
Yes.
So to add more debt doesn't make sense. And the piece of this that is really concerning is several years ago, about a decade ago, the legislature negotiated a water bond. And the idea was we'll set aside money and the ability to build 2 additional dams in California. We haven't built an additional dam in California in 40 years. We raised 1 dam, Lake Nacimiento, and that's it. We have not built more capacity. Well, California has grown to 40 million people, but the water situation in California is only meant for 20 million people. And so we thought that we were going to get 2 new dams. They didn't build those dams. We already gave that authorization 10 years ago, and now they want more money to do environmental projects and projects around water. Why would we give them more money when they haven't done the project we already asked them to do? And this is the same principle. It's a general obligation bond, meaning for every dollar you borrow, you pay back another dollar. So that's $2 over 30 years that you and I probably will pay for a while, but our children and our grandchildren will pay that debt based upon our vote.
So 10 billion for schools, 10 billion for safe drinking water. So, okay, they want 20 billion so far.
Yes.
So far. Okay, Proposition 5. What is that?
Proposition
what has to do with it?
Proposition 5 is still related to bond and debt or borrowing more money. And the idea is a lot of local governments, when they want to pass local bonds, they have to have a 2/3 majority vote to get it. So if, let's just say for an example, you live in a small town, there's 1,000 people, 1,000 voters. If you wanted to pass a bond, you have to get 667 people to vote for that.
No.
Right? Yeah. 2/3, 67% to vote for that. That's hard to do because a lot of people say, I'm taxed high enough already. I pay enough. And what are you doing with the money that we've spent already? And where's your oversight?
And there is no accountability.
There's no accountability. And so what happens is local governments struggle to pass these higher bonds. Now, there are times when a local government has a legitimate need. They need to build something. The question is, if you reduce that threshold to 55%, so from 67% to 55, so it's still what they call a supermajority vote.
Of course.
A majority vote is 50% plus 1 vote.
Exactly.
Right? So in that same scenario, 1,000 people, you need 501 people to vote for it. Now it would be 550 instead of 670. Okay.
Lower.
I'm just trying to make the numbers really simple.
Yeah, this 55%.
So in doing that, you don't have to demonstrate to as many people that you're going to be as prudent or as good with that money as you would if you had 2/3 voting for it. And so you can throw, what they do is sometimes they'll throw in different projects to cater to different interest groups to get their vote and their buy-in to get to that threshold. Instead of saying to the whole community, we want this to be helpful for everybody, they then start throwing out favors and special projects when it's a lower threshold. I think it's a bad idea. Local governments should be able to make the case why they need to borrow more money at a higher threshold.
For me, when I read it, it said, allows local bonds for affordable housing. This is like a big title. So if I didn't understand what they mean, like what is underlying this, I will agree, of course, for that.
Well, a lot of people struggle in California affording their house. Housing is expensive. I have 5 kids. I don't know where they're going to buy a house in California when they graduate from high school or after they get done with college. That's a concern for every family. But why should we take your tax dollars to give to the government to build a more expensive home and raise the cost of living instead of reducing the barriers and laws that make it expensive to build a house?
Correct. And more debt.
Correct.
Okay, so proposition 6.
So this is an interesting one because what this does is it's supposed to remove involuntary servitude as a punishment for crime. It's supposed to make what they call slavery illegal. Well, slavery was already made illegal back after the Civil War in the United States. However, it's different and distinct when you go to prison. If you are convicted of a crime and you have to serve time and you're in the state prison system, you lose rights. You lose the right to freely associate with people, to travel. You're locked up in a jail cell for a reason. To protect society, protect yourself, to pay your debt down over a period of time. Well, there are certain activists that believe that those who are in jail should not be required to do any sort of work because they call that slavery. Now, again, you're in jail. You've lost rights already. So this is supposed to say, well, they can just sit in jail and do whatever they want. And they don't have to pay back restitution. They don't have to get jobs. I would say when I worked for Governor Schwarzenegger, I worked in the Department of Finance. My job was to oversee all the prisons of the state and their finances. And so I would travel a lot to different prisons and jails and, just see what's going on. Prisons are terrible places, right? Nobody wants to spend time there.
Of course.
But you want to make sure that the money you're putting into there are rehabilitating people. So when they come out, they're not committing crimes or doing the things that put them into prison in the first place.
Exactly. They are in the prison for a reason.
Yes. And a lot of these guys will learn different skills. Maybe they'll learn how to cook or do laundry, maybe make furniture. They'll get paid for those services, but they're not paid the same as you and I would be paid on the outside. It's pennies on the dollar, but we get it. But we're also paying for their food, for their shelter. We're paying for their clothing. We're paying for all the guards to guard them and all the costs that come with that. But they can often use that money to buy things when they're in prison, to pay for paper or books. Maybe they want to buy a TV for their sell at some point in time. Maybe have different little things that they can get in prison. But also that money is used for often restitution. If you have somebody that stole money from you or stole property, they need to pay that debt off. Well, if they're in prison, how can they earn money unless they do these jobs? So the question here is, can you prohibit those kinds of activities forced upon people in prison? I would say this is not a good public policy to make, and it would actually make our prisons worse.
Yes, so they don't want them to do any work.
Correct.
So we should say yes or no in this one, but yeah, we have to think about it, of course. So let's go to the most important ones now. All of them are important, to be honest. But let's go to Proposition 32.
And just to clarify, too, the ones we just talked about were all given to us pretty much by the legislature.
Yes, right.
So they had to make certain different kinds of deals to make them happen. When you pass a bond, it has to go before the people. They have to vote on it. And when you change the Constitution from the legislature, they have to vote on it. Okay, so now we're moving to the 30s.
Yeah.
So
another 5 propositions.
Right.
Yeah.
Proposition 32, which is the first one, this was a citizens' initiative.
Yes.
And the idea is that it's really expensive to live in California, so they want to increase the minimum wage to $18. Now,
It's already 16 now.
It's already 16, right?
Yeah.
For most.
It's just increased like this year, I think.
This year, yeah. So there already is an increase in minimum wage. And people say that's still not enough. We can't survive.
Honestly, it's not.
And it's not.
No.
But that's not how economics works, right?
Inflation, too.
Inflation's a big piece of this. But think about it. If you're a small business owner and you have 10 employees, you obviously want to pay them as much as you can.
Can't survive.
But you can only pay them as much as you're getting in terms of returns on services or products. So if you have a restaurant, your margins are going to be small, right? And so you may pay as much as you can, but you may have to have your family, you may work full time or 80 hours a week to pay as much as you can. If you artificially increase that cost, maybe you have a landscaping services, you mow lawns for people, or you paint houses, or you print books, or whatever the business is. you're trying to maximize that cost, but every time you increase the cost of labor, then you increase the cost of the product.
Correct.
And then you decrease your profit.
Yeah.
Now, some people make a lot of money; they can do that, but some people don't.
In some point, it will not be worth it
Correct.
to continue I'm a business owner.
Yes.
A small business owner, and I have this issue in my office. Like, is it increasing the wages every year? So if I can hire 2 last year, this year I will hire 1.
Right. Right. And so you want to pay your employees as much as you can.
Yeah.
But when the government artificially sets a level at that, guess what happens? You hire fewer people because you might have paid 2 people $9 an hour to do a very simple job. Sweep the floors, clean the bathroom, take out the trash, maintenance stuff. But now if you have to pay one person $18 an hour, guess what? You're only employing 1 person instead of 2.
Yeah.
And they're now not contributing to the society or paying taxes themselves.
So, because this proposition is really confusing for me, as a small business owner, I will say no. But for the individuals, like the workers, the employees themselves, why they will say no?
So I would say no if I were making minimum wage, because guess what happens when you increase that wage? Businesses mechanize things.
Right.
So this is really simple. The cost for a lot of businesses has become so expensive that when you go in to get that service, do you talk to a human being anymore, or do you talk to a kiosk or a computer?
Correct.
Right? Almost all the ordering of restaurants is done on a kiosk now. And you got a couple people in the back. So they, instead of paying employees, they bought computers and robots.
Machines.
So if you're on the minimum wage, you don't want this to be the case,
To continue
because
work.
it will limit your ability to get a job, and it will limit the amount of jobs that other people create for you.
And I'm looking to this in a different way too. So if I fire some of my employees, now the state will base unemployment.
Yes.
And we will be in more debt. I feel like, I don't know, I feel like they are not thinking together,
They're not.
right?
They're not. And again, I sympathize with people that aren't making a lot of money. I grew up in poverty. I understand what it's like. It's terrible when you don't know if you're going to eat the next meal, if you can pay the rent. I've been there. But by the government artificially setting that wage, that messes up the rest of the economy and doesn't fix the problem.
That's true. That's true. Yes. So I don't think it's a good idea for the business owner or even for the employee.
I have learned with most ballot propositions, if it's too confusing or you're not sure, vote no.
Yeah. Okay. Proposition 33.
Proposition 33 repeals an old law. It's called the Costa-Hawkins Act. And what happened is the Costa-Hawkins Act really restricted the ability for landlords to raise rent in certain aspects, mostly apartment complexes that were built after a certain time. And if you go to places like Santa Monica, they have a really strong what they call rent control.
Yeah.
So you can only increase rent a little bit at a time over the years. And what happens in places like Santa Monica is, again, it's well-intentioned. But if you're a landlord and you can't increase the rent, are you going to take any of your own money to improve that property? Are you going to paint it? Are you going to replace the carpets? Are you going to fix the garbage disposal when it goes out, or a leaky toilet?
Nope.
You're not going to do those things.
Of course.
And again, a lot of renters complain, well, hey, I'm a renter, I have rights. They forget that they're not the ones that have to put out all the costs. Now, there are some landlords that are not good people. We can all agree on that. And they don't take care of their property and they raise their rents too high. But most people use rental properties as investments. So if you're older or you're retired,
it's investment.
Exactly. You'll buy a couple of houses or apartments, and you're doing that as your retirement income.
Right.
You're not doing it because you're trying to become a millionaire. You're doing it because you're trying to survive. Now, this would repeal that act and would say that cities and counties can have rent control everywhere.
Yeah.
So if you're a landlord, guess what? I'm going to sell my house because I don't want to deal with that.
Isn't that increasing the inflation?
It will increase inflation. It will reduce the stock, the housing stock, the number of houses out there. in apartments, and it will get people that would just say, I'm out of the rental business entirely.
Correct. And this is what, like, because my position, my work as a enrolled agent, I have my tax office, so I see it like these people renting the homes they bought. It's an investment, and as you said, as a retirement income they will receive after they retire.
Yes.
So if you control or oversee them, they will not have enough even to fix or to pay the mortgage or the property tax.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay. Sounds good. So now we are going to Proposition 34.
So we're getting into 34. Let me finish off with 33 really quick.
Yes.
That's being supported by the AIDS Healthcare Foundation.
Okay.
The AIDS Healthcare Foundation receives money usually from the federal government to help buy medication for people who have AIDS or HIV.
Did we skip this one?
No, we just talked about it.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Okay, but I just need to clarify this.
Yes, please.
They're supporting this because they've taken this money and instead of developing and working on health issues, they've created this big project to build apartments and get in the housing industry. That leads into Proposition 34.
Yes.
Because instead of taking their money and investing it into healthcare, they're putting it into real estate. So Proposition 34 is being supported by the California Apartment Association, which has said, listen, we think that when you come in and you try to take away the protections for landlords, you're going to hurt them. We don't think that the AIDS Healthcare Foundation should be doing this.
Oh.
So this proposition is specifically targeted to the AIDS Healthcare Foundation. It doesn't say their name in it.
Yeah, I looked at it.
But it builds the proposition or the measure that only applies to one organization. And that is the AIDS Healthcare Foundation. And this says, listen, you need to spend all your money, or most of it. You need to spend 98% in healthcare instead of in apartments. So this is kind of a political feud that came onto the ballot. I understand why the Apartment Association is angry. I understand how they feel like they're betrayed. And there are a lot of people on all sides of the political spectrum that are supporting this. I think the Democrats, the Republicans, Apartment Association, taxpayer organizations are all in support of this. My question to a lot of people is, do they feel right about legislating through the ballot against one organization, even if they don't like that organization?
Exactly.
I think that's an ethical and a moral question people have to ask. I can understand and I can agree with the policy. I can disagree with the process, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree.
So people that are listening to this need to say, okay, do I like that this group, the AIDS Healthcare Foundation, is using money that should go to healthcare, but for housing? That's one question. And then they should ask, is this the way we should fix it?
Yeah.
Or should we find another way to fix that problem?
So, so Lance, if you can, explain Proposition 34 in a plain English, what they are telling us this proposition about.
This proposition will tell the AIDS Healthcare Foundation to spend their money in healthcare, not on housing. So if you vote yes, you're saying yes, you should only spend on healthcare stuff for mostly. If you say no, it just is the status quo. Nothing changes. So they may continue to do what they're doing.
Explained,
yes,
it's not how it will look.
Yeah.
How it looks like. Okay. Moving to Proposition 35.
Yes. So this is very complex, and I've been encouraged people to go through and read the fiscal analysis here in their guide. This is really, really complex.
So we'll try to make it simple to our.
I'm going to make it as simple as possible.
Yes.
There's a certain tax that comes in through what they call managed care organizations, usually large groups like Kaiser or Sutter Health or Western Health, whatever. Large healthcare groups that most people are insured underneath. That money's supposed to go to the hospitals and to the healthcare. Over the years, it goes through the state, and the state uses it as kind of a piggy bank to do other things. And so it hasn't been since Governor Pete Wilson, a long time ago, like 30 years ago, that they've actually used this money exclusively for healthcare issues. It's so interesting how these conversations come to healthcare and housing, right?
Yeah.
Two of the big costs. So what this bill would say is that you're required to spend this money in this place. And in doing that, it would take away the discretion for the legislature to make these decisions. This gets back to the question we were discussing earlier.
Yes.
When you are a republic, you allow the legislature to make these complicated decisions. Because frankly, are you an expert in this issue area?
No.
I'm not either, but I have dealt in this issue for a long time.
You are.
I don't even feel comfortable
I know.
explaining this because it's so complex. I believe that the legislature should make these really, really hard decisions.
Yeah.
And they should come because you and I talk to our legislators and help inform them. I think it's not a good idea. This is what you call ballot box budgeting, where you require the state to spend certain money a certain way. And again, they can't change it unless they come back to the voters, which is an expensive proposition to do. So if you want to fix this problem, this may put a Band-Aid on it. I don't think it fixes the problem. And in fact, the legislature is going to continue to argue back and forth about this money, and they'll find a new way, because they're very creative, to break it instead of fixing it all at once.
Yeah, that's true.
So a yes vote would segregate this money, but it would be ballot box budgeting. A no vote says, legislature, go and figure it out. Fix the problem. Don't come back to us.
Yes, which is what I will say, actually.
Yeah.
And most of us should say. So, because when you look at the title of the proposition, you feel like, oh, wow, that's great. Yes, of course. So this is why when I talk to you, like, I feel like they attract us, like, with the title, but we don't know what the title means because we are not the expertise.
Correct.
Yeah. We're going to the last proposition, Proposition 36.
So Proposition 36.
But it's confusing too.
This one's also confusing, but it's less confusing because I'll simplify it.
Yeah.
This will make crime illegal again. And what I mean by that is in 2000, and I think it was 2011 or 2010, Governor Brown at the time was trying to battle with costs of keeping people in prison. So what he did is the legislature passed a bill called AB 109, and it was called realignment. Basically, it took a lot of state problems like public safety and jails, and it moved it down to the locals. So the locals all of a sudden had to deal with a lot of criminals that they didn't have to deal with before. Then there was another ballot proposition in 2014 called Proposition 47, and then one a couple years later called Prop 57, which reduced a lot of crimes, especially theft, from felonies to misdemeanors.
Yeah.
Now, felony is really serious. Like if you steal something over a certain threshold, you should go to jail.
Is that the $950 or?
This is the $950 threshold that they created. And so when they dropped the threshold, they did a few other things. They said that we can't add these up over multiple events. So if I stole $949 from you, I stole $949 from the church, I stole $949 from Safeway or 7-Eleven, those are all separate instances and are all misdemeanors. And so what happened over a period of time is police officers and sheriffs, they stopped writing citations because people were like, whatever, they'd throw it away. And they would actually walk in the stores with their calculators to make sure they stayed underneath. And then eventually stores were like, we don't want to put ourselves in jeopardy or in danger, so we're not going to chase after these people. And so if you go in a lot of stores now, especially in the cities, everything's behind a glass door or locked up. You have to get a clerk to come get it for you. And it's also caused problems in other public safety areas. So Proposition 36 would change that, so that threshold would make it back to a felony again, would also require that if you do multiple things, they can add those together.
Yes.
And then would have stricter penalties for those that commit these kinds of crimes.
This is a good one.
This is a good one. And this is one of the few where it fixes something that the legislature refused to fix, actually.
Yeah.
This last year, the legislature had the ability to fix these issues, and they didn't. They wouldn't do it. And so it took a lot of business owners to put millions of dollars to get this on the ballot.
Yes, because, and even it makes, like, it's not safe Like
No.
for us to live, like if you steal something less than 950, you're okay with it. Like, so as you said, if you can do it several times and you're free.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's great. So I think we did them all. Yeah. Thank you so much, Lance. But I have a question for you. Do you have any advice for voters who are trying to make sense of all the information out there about these propositions?
Yeah, I would say research. So they go and if they get this in the mail, it goes to every registered voter's house. Read the arguments, and if you go in here, every ballot proposition will have a couple things. It will have in here an explanation. It will give a summary of the issue. It will have some background, and then it will talk about the proposal and what would change in that law. And then the other really cool thing is at the end of it, it will have the arguments in favor and the arguments in opposition. Read those arguments, listen to both sides of the debate, and see which side you like. And when you do that, then they do one other thing. Then they flip it. They go back and they say, okay, we want the opponents to now argue against the proponents or the supporters' position, and vice versa. So you actually get a really good dialogue between these letters.
Correct.
I would encourage people to read this information, and then they can go to the different websites that are often listed in the ballot guide.
Okay, so before we wrap up, is there anything else you think voters should know about the proposition or the election in general?
Yeah, I think voters should, once they get their ballot this week, they should vote as soon as possible and get their ballot turned in. You can turn it in at a ballot box drop box, which is listed in your guide. You can drop it in the mailbox for free. It doesn't cost anything.
Yeah.
Or you can take it to the registrar's voter's office. You can also sign up too to track your ballot.
Yeah.
It's very simple. With the Secretary of State's office, just go to the Google Secretary of State, or even has the email or the website address here. I track my ballot, so my ballot's going to be mailed to me tomorrow.
Yeah.
And when I get it, I'll fill it out, and my wife and my son, who's also a registered voter, will fill out our ballots, and then I will take them in by Thursday or Friday this week. I'm not waiting at all to get them in.
Okay, but you're saying like as soon as possible.
Yes.
What's that mean? Or what's that like?
Within this next week. And the reason I say this is twofold. One, if you're a candidate running for office, for the Assembly or for the Senate, maybe you're running for Congress or City Council, when you are raising money for funds to share your knowledge and information with people, and I was a candidate one time too, so I remember doing this. You can get lists of all the people that have voted, and you can say, okay, I'm not going to send information to them. I'm not going to mail out my postcard to them.
Yes.
And that saves me, it's basically about $1 a thing usually.
Yeah.
So if I have 10,000 fewer people I have to send stuff to, I can take that money and focus on the people who haven't voted.
Right.
So that's one thing. Number two, and this happened to a really good friend of mine. He waited till election day. He went to vote because he thought this is the way it should be done. But the law changed a few years ago, which doesn't require ID. You don't have to have ID. In fact, most people won't even look at your ID.
Yeah.
Even if you show it to them, they won't look at it.
Yes.
And so when he went in to vote, and this is a very prominent lobbyist in Sacramento. This is not just some normal neighbor or friend of mine. He got there. He found out that somebody had already voted in his place illegally.
By his name.
With his name, and his vote didn't count. And it wasn't until months later after the election that he found out who that person was. Now, that person was being brought up on election fraud, but guess what? It didn't matter. He lost his ability to make his decision because he wanted to wait till the very end.
Yes.
Get in and vote as soon as possible. And if you have a family or friends or neighbors that don't know where to go or take it, you can go and what they call harvest that ballot. You can take the ballot in. They just have to sign the envelope. That's all they have to do. They can give it to you, and you can take it. Churches can gather these up if they want. Maybe different
drop it
groups.
off. You mean by take it, like drop it off.
Yeah, if
You don't vote for them.
No,
Just
no,
drop it off.
they don't vote for them.
Yeah.
Exactly. You still do all your voting. You seal the envelope, and then you sign the back.
Yeah.
And you can take it to trusted friends. Maybe some people at your church want to go out and collect all these ballots because they're
great idea.
principled. But I'm telling people, get every person to vote. And those was like, it doesn't matter, my vote doesn't
Yes.
count. It does count.
Yes. What's your advice for these people? Like, my vote will never count. They are not waiting for me. Like, I will not be effective. Like,
So in March, during the primary election in San Jose, so up north in Northern California, there was a race for a congressional seat. And there were several people in the race. I think there was 4 or 5. But on the election day, there was 3 that were in the top. You could only go with the top 2. But number 2 and number 3 were tied. They were tied. They did, I think, 1, maybe 2 recounts. And one literally came out, I think, a vote more than the other guy. And that guy that came out is really radical. He's the one that votes against all the parent stuff. He's the one that votes for this aggressive sex ed. He's the one that votes for really things that are against churches. He's now on the ballot to go to Congress. Now, I don't think he's going to win. I think the number 1 guy is probably going to win. But he beat out another guy who is a little more liberal than I am. But I respect and I think has better judgment.
yes.
But that's because of 1 vote.
That's scary. It is.
And if conservatives or people of faith show up to vote, we actually can turn the state red really quick,
Yeah.
very quickly.
Yeah. Hopefully. Hopefully.
People have to show up, though.
Yes, that's true. We have to show up. So, thank you, Lance. Thank you so much for your time and for helping us break down these important propositions for the California 2024 election. And I remember, your vote is your voice. So make sure to head to the polls informed and ready to make your choice. And I really appreciate you're here today. And of course, you will have to come one more episode after the election.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Happy to do so.
explaining the new rules.
Yes,
And
I'd be happy to.
yeah, thank you so much, Lance.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. أعزائي المشاهدين، شكرا لكم. يا رب تكون الحلقة فعلا مفيدة من مصدر ثقة. طبعا لانس يعني خبرة طويلة جدا في الستيت بوليسي، وطبعا شغال معاهم لغاية النهاردة، وما كانش ينفع ان انا اشرح الكلام ده غير من حد مصدر ثقة عارف ايه الخبايا وعارف ايه اللي مقصود بالبروبوزيشنز دي. طبعا احنا مش بنقول تقول ولا تقول لا، بس اعتقد ان احنا اديناكم على الاقل فكره معناهم ايه الكلام ده، لان الكلام ساعات بنشوفه حلو قوي وبسيط ومفرح جدا. ده هياخدوا فلوس عشان يزودوا الميديكال، ده هياخدوا فلوس عشان يعملوا الهاوسنج، لكن تحت السطور في حاجات احنا ما نعرفش نتكلم فيها. لكن طبعا السياسيين اللي بقاله يعني لانس بقاله اكتر من 18 years experience in politics في الستيت، فده طبعا كان هو اللي لازم يقول لنا الكلام ده. شكرا ليكم، ويا رب تكون الحلقة مفيدة النهاردة. وافتكروا لازم تروحوا وتنتخبوا. صوتك بجد بجد مهم جدا. We all have to vote. This election is really important USA. واحنا كلنا عايشين في أمريكا، وكلنا لازم نخاف على بلدنا أمريكا، وربنا يحميها ويحمي ولادنا. ومن فضلكم ما تكسلوش، املوا الورقة دي وحطوها في الظرف وروحوا ارموها في أي مكان مخصص بتاع الإلكشن. بيبقى فيه صناديق ترمي فيه الظرف. خلاص كده انت كده عملت اللي عليك، وربنا يحافظ على بلدنا وعليكم وعلينا، وطبعا يحافظ على خدمة قناة لوجوس. شكرا ليكم، كنت مبسوطة جدا وانا معاكم النهاردة. انتظرونا في حلقة جديدة من برنامجكم مصدر ثقة.